Hello, and welcome to the first episode of My Latest Obsession. My name is Lisa, and I have a tendency to go down the most random rabbit holes. So I wanted to start a podcast and use it as an outlet to get these random discoveries out, because I just want to talk about them. And I don't really want to, I guess I'd never know who I can bug about this. So here I am, just putting it here. Before I start the episode, I am just gonna kind of talk about some movie or TV show that I'm currently watching or binging or maybe just finished that I wanted to give a mini review about, because I don't know how long, I didn't time this, I don't know how long this is gonna be, so I'm I guess I'm lightweight worried about time. I want to fill that with another thing I do is I watch something and I just want to talk about it, and I don't know if somebody else is watching it. I don't want to spoil anything, so let's just do this real quick. Spoiler alert. I just finished watching all 3 seasons of The Morning Show on Apple TV. I thought it was a good-ish show. I guess I wasn't wowed by it. I really liked the first season, which I understand, how people got hooked onto it. I guess the second season I had a little bit of a problem with, and this is my own problem. So what they did was that they kind of were covering everything right before COVID hit. So they're February 20th, 2020, March 3rd, 2020. And you're oh my God, it's coming. And I guess that anxiety and just personal things that happened to me, it was really I was really worried I was going to get triggered, if I'm being honest. So I was getting more and more nervous, oh man, how are they going to showcase this? They did a good job. They didn't actually show them at home doing their own broadcast, which I think made a lot of sense. I think that just location wise it would be very difficult, and probably money wise it would be difficult. So I think they did a good job of kind of showing the world literally right before we went on lockdown, and then not pretty soon, but after that, because then in season 3 I think it's 2023. I really liked Jennifer Aniston's and Reese Witherspoon's dynamic, their chemistry, everything in season 1. I felt we lost that in season 2. I felt they tried to gain that back in season 3. So, and it just didn't work. I don't know. I guess I thought there would be more between Reese and Jen. So I was a little bit disappointed in that. I feel bad, but it's just the truth. I wanted to see this kind of weird girl relationship, but also this manipulation. Sounds bad, but it's true. I wanted to kind of see where they would try to manipulate each other, because I think what's nice sometimes is when we see the depth of a character, that they're not 100% perfect, and because these two don't 100% trust each other, where do they try to manipulate each other, Or we could have went the other route, which is where they did 100% trust each other and support each other what they could, and would manipulate the people around them to get their way. So I kind of wanted it to go either that way or the other way I just mentioned. So I didn't feel I got that. I will, if they have season 4, I have no idea what's going on with the show. I will probably watch it. Still, I really love both Jennifer and Reese's performances. My favorite little thing was that Reese had a southern accent, which you first season 1, most of the time she has a southern accent, and then season 2 it kind of faded away, which I kind of just thought came with being a morning anchor. I think personally, I think that you kind of hear that a lot with a lot of actors, actresses, even British celebrities, I guess, because not just actors, musicians too. I feel their accent has kind of drifted away from where they're from, maybe more as if they're from London, or even less British, So I just kind of understood that, and then whenever she had a scene with her brother, it's her southern accent came back. So I thought that was a really cute thing that she did there. I don't know if she did that on purpose. It was a little thing, but I thought that was a really good kind of character thing, because sometimes when you're with your family or an old friend, you just kind of morph back to who you were when you were with them years ago, right? I feel the same way with sometimes I like am with high school friends. I'm just like, all of a sudden I'm high school Lisa again. So it's just the same. I gave the show a rating. I would give it like a 7.5 out of 10. It's like, I liked it, didn't love it. I felt like there could be more. And it was like, it needs improvement, you know, like I think it needs improvement. I think that it's a slippery slope of going bad, but it could still get better. So that's how I see it currently, right now. Last thing, I thought Steve's performance was really, really good. So I really enjoyed watching him on the show, even though he was like the nasty character. It was kind of weird, actually. Sorry. I don't know why, but when he started kissing one of the girls, I like couldn't handle it. I was like, this is like watching your dad. It's like, oh my God, this is so gross. Anyways, okay, let's get started. And the topic of today's podcast will be about bog bodies. Try saying that 3 times really fast. Bog bodies, bog bodies, bog bodies, bog bodies. Oh, I kind of did it. Okay. I didn't think I would be able to do that. All right. Anyways, I'm going to start with how I even like heard about bog bodies, what even got me digging. And what happened was that I was on YouTube, and I like to sometimes watch this little series the Wired channel has, where they have an expert come in and they answer questions from Twitter, or I think anywhere on the internet, or I think it was mostly Twitter. And so in this specific video, they had a forensics expert. That I can't say. Forensics expert. Third time's a charm. They had a forensics expert on, and there was a question about the dead marshes. So the dead marshes is from the Lord of the Rings. So it's like, why are they asking a forensics expert about the dead marshes from Lord of the Rings? Like, I just felt like the two didn't connect unless he is a Lord of the Rings fan himself. But no, he actually like went on and had an explanation, which was when he started talking about bog bodies. He kind of provided a pretty good answer, but I wanted to know more. I was like, what? The dead marshes could potentially be based off of something in real life. Let's get into this. Actually, hold on. Before I get into it, I wanted to give a warning because I do think that it might get a little bit graphic, and maybe I might be blunt about things at times, because I am going to be talking about dead bodies. So I want to be respectful. I don't know. I may not be as delicate is what I'm trying to say. So I'm just going to give a heads up, apologize. Sorry. Now I'll really get into it. All right, so bog bodies are dead human bodies that are almost perfectly preserved. Now, how does this work? So the preservation of the bog bodies are in peat bogs, and it's a natural phenomenon and not a result of human mummification. It's caused by the physical and biochemical composition of the bogs, and different types of bogs can affect the mummification process differently. Obviously, I just wrote that down and read it back to you, but let's put this in Lisa terms. Peat bogs are like a mossy area, so think of the dead marshes from the Lord of the Rings. These areas just have the perfect temperature, chemical, and natural resources to preserve a body to near perfection. Now, it's not like the Lord of the Rings where you can see this body floating in the water and they're like actually perfectly preserved, like as if the day they died. There is a little bit of discoloration and some changes that happen to the skin, and obviously other parts, because it's not like the movies. But anyways, what makes these bodies such a phenomenon is that they usually still have their skin and internal organs. Just in case, if you don't know what I'm talking about in terms of the dead marshes, if you ever watched Lord of the Rings, The Twin Towers, there is a scene where they are in the dead marshes. Gollum / Smeagol is leading Frodo and Sam, and you know, hear Sam like, they're dead things in the water, dead faces. And then there is a moment where Frodo's like staring at the face and the eyes open, and then he falls in and blah blah blah. So that's the dead marshes. If you don't remember what I'm talking about, that's it. So as we get deeper into this, I want to talk about a specific bog body named the Tullen Man. The Tullen Man was discovered in 1950 in Tullen, Denmark. Peat cutters Viggo and Emma Husgaard, I hope I said that right. They discovered a corpse while cutting peat. That is their profession. They cut peat and they immediately freaked out. They called the police, and they were thinking this is a murder victim and was scared about a potential killer nearby. The police came and quickly realized that this body isn't a recent murder, but they still wanted to do what they could to collect evidence, because maybe this is a victim from an unsolved murder case that they have from years ago. As they kept digging, they soon realized that there's more to this body. It became clear that this was not from 20, 30, 40 years ago. This body was from a long, long time ago. The body laid in a fetal position, buried under more than 7.5 feet of peat. He wore a pointed skin cap of sheepskin and wool, and it was fastened under his chin. He was naked, but there was a smooth hide belt around his waist, so it is believed that he had clothes on and it just didn't survive the years. He also had a noose made from pleated animal hide drawn tight around his neck, and it trailed down his back. His hair was short and almost entirely hidden under his cap, and you could see a little stubble on his chin and upper lip. Last thing to note is that his face is one of the best preserved faces among all the other bog bodies discovered. And that's why he is one of the most famous bog bodies, and why I decided to focus on this one in particular. So what happened next? Well, the police then called the Silkboard Museum so the scientists can determine what to do next. Now remember, this is the 1950s, so they're freaking out because the longer the body is exposed and no longer buried under all that peat, it is starting to deteriorate. The scientists obviously wanted to keep it as well preserved as possible for their examination, and because these bodies just don't show up every day. They finally decided to dig around the body so that it's leveled up higher, and then gently moved him onto a plank so that he basically wasn't disturbed and he still had all the peat that was always below him. And once they got a good grip of him, they added 4 more planks so that they basically created a box around him, and that's how they took him back to the museum. The scientists determined that he was approximately 40 years old when he died. I'm gonna get a little gross now, so if you get squeamish, I'll take a minute so you can skip ahead. Once the scientists had the Tullen Man in their laboratories, they kind of started taking him apart. His foot went there, his arm went here, he kind of went all over the place. I was kind of shocked when I found this out, also grossed out that they just wanted to take him apart. But, in order to understand what year he passed away and more things about him, they kind of had to do this. So I get it, but it was a little hard in the beginning to wrap my head around it, but they had to do what they had to do just to get their research. They discovered that his heart, lungs, and liver were all well preserved, and they were able to see what his last meal was. It was porridge with barley, flax, wild weed seeds, and some fish. Again, this is one of the other coolest things that I realized when I discovered about bog bodies, is that most of the time that they can see what their last meal was, like whatever they ate within the last 24 hours before they had passed away. So I don't know why, but I think it'd be hysterical if, let's say 2,000-3,000 years from now, they find a body, again, a bog body, and it had a cheeseburger in it. I just don't know. I don't know. I think that'd be so funny, but things are different. I highly doubt. I don't know, actually. What if there's a murder and they buried a beatbox? That'd be so crazy. Okay, anyways. They believe he shrunk over the years because he was approximately 5'3", which is my height, and that's pretty short for his time. So he probably was an average height of his time, but when they discovered him, he was much smaller. They do believe that he died by hanging and not by strangulation. So the next big question is, when did he die? Well, with better technology these days and the most recent tests that they've done, they believe that he died around 405 to 384 BC. Yes, BC, before Christ. So that means he's been laying there for over 2,000 years. I still can't believe it. When I first heard that, I was like, I'm sorry, what? And then I'm doing research, and I'm also still stunned. And now I'm saying it out loud, and I'm still stunned. 2,000, he's been laying there for 2,000 years. More than 2,000 years. 2,000. That's why I'm saying, that's kind of why I was like, oh, wouldn't it be funny if someone 2,000 years from now found a body and had a cheeseburger in it? But seriously, 2,000. So, just to give you some perspective, I googled, what year did the Roman Empire begin? Google says 27 BC. So the Tall Man is still 300 years older than when the Roman Empire began. The Roman Empire. Like, I still am having a hard time wrapping my head around that. I cannot believe he, like, is that a whole time to say? Like, it's like, what kind of music were they listening to back then? What were they using as currency? You know? I'm sure this is documented all somewhere, but it's just crazy. Like, you know, we know so much about the Roman Empire, and it was 300 years before that. Like, okay, I'm cutting it here. Let's keep going. So you can actually see the Tallinn Man on display at the Silkeborg Museum in Denmark. They have him lying like how they discovered him in the fetal position. His whole body is actually a replica because, again, they kind of took him apart to do the research. I think they tried to gather everything back, but it didn't work out. So the body is a replica, but they did preserve his head. So from the neck up, they were like, this is so special. Like, his face is so well preserved. We really do have to do what we can to keep this for years. So what they did is that they dipped him in beeswax. And again, this is the 1950s. So technology is so different then. And they were like, what do we do? Because you have a limited amount of time. In my imagination, saying this because, you know, he's exposed. He's deteriorating at this point. I don't know how they preserve him. I don't know what other way they could have, like, preserved him. So that's what they did. They were like, let's dip him in some beeswax. It worked. He's still there. You could see his face to this day. I think they said that he shrunk a little bit in that time between, like, before they dipped him. So he shrunk a little bit, but I think that's pretty freaking cool. And let me tell you, I'm very tempted to go to Denmark and go to that museum and check him out. So let's get this podcast going so that I can afford a trip to Denmark and we could do a Bog's Body Museum tour, because actually in Denmark they have discovered a lot of bog bodies and they're all in different museums in Denmark. So I would love to see, I don't know about all of them, but most of them. Last thing before I close this up, my most important question: did Mr. Tolkien know about the bog bodies? Because this whole thing started with the mention of Lord of the Rings, the Dead Marshes, and I really was curious, was there a connection there between the bog bodies and Mr. Tolkien? Because he is European and these bodies are discovered in Denmark, which is in Europe, so he must have heard about this, you know, maybe. Well, from my research, it sounds like no. It sounds like Mr. Tolkien was actually inspired from his time in the military rather than the bog bodies. The reason I say this is because the Dead Marshes contain many, many, many dead men and elves, similar to how one would see in a battlefield. The bog bodies discovered were usually alone. Another reason why I believe Mr. Tolkien wasn't inspired by the bog bodies is because the dead men and elves in the water died in war, arguably fighting on the good side. Most of the bog bodies discovered are believed to have been criminals who died for a crime they have committed or human sacrifice. So even though there isn't any hard evidence telling us whether or not Mr. Tolkien was inspired by the real-life bog bodies, it's leaning heavily on no. So I'm sure another big question is, what happened? Why was he hung, you know? And I think that obviously if he committed a crime, we're not going to know what crime he committed. And that is a possible reason why he was hung. That was his punishment for his crime. That is one reason. There is another case that at this time, a lot of the groups in that area were committing human sacrifices. So there is that possibility too. There isn't enough evidence to tell for sure what exactly happened. All they know is that he was hung and he wasn't strangled. So it was done purposefully. Well, obviously either way is purposefully, but it wasn't like malice. It wasn't like he was just chilling and that happened. All right, guys, that's it. Thank you so much for listening to me. I really appreciate you. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week. Tune in next week as we will be talking about a very specific orca attack. Ooh. All right, I need to end this. Okay, bye.